Hey, it's Luminostic. Today we're going to talk about Jerry Garcia because it's his birthday, and I consider him to be one of the most important figures of the 20th century, both in terms of the evolution of consciousness and, well, psychedelics obviously go hand in hand, but also the other subjects that I talk about, shamanism and hermetic magic. Basically, the job of the white magician is to catalyze the expansion of consciousness, and I think Garcia was one of the most powerful figures in that particular area in the last 2,000 years. So do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, support us on Patreon. You'll find a link to click below. Okay, so Garcia, as you probably know, was the lead guitarist and leader of the Grateful Dead, who were basically an improvisational rock group that drew from all different styles of music in order to sort of create this stew of jazz, country, even eventually hard rock, reggae, everything that existed that they could find a way to blend into their style. And their concerts were really about the fact that, psychedelics, they figured out, I think, that the psychedelics will bring down different filters in the human consciousness, and one of those filters causes us to experience consciousness as a singular phenomenon when it's actually a field. So they figured out that they could bring down these filters and experience the collective mind. And when this happened between the band and the audience, it would generate this tremendous surge of energy, and extraordinary things would happen in the music. Oftentimes it would seem that the weather had responded, and the effect of this experience on people was something akin to the gnosis. When I first went to see them, I noticed right away that the band wasn't singing about the subjects that they conferred understanding to their audience about. So they weren't up there saying, love your brother, be kind, we're all one, none of that kind of stuff. The music was about murder, it was about gambling, all these, tragic human stories. Some of them were just fun, kind of upbeat things, it can't be dark and stormy all the time. So, they weren't preaching, and yet everyone understood what they were communicating through the vibrations in the music. And of course, this is what any real magician actually does. The real job of the Hermetic magician is to take the line of consciousness and tow it forward, because when one unit of consciousness moves forward, it drags the whole collective net with it. And I think that in terms of people that have lived in the modern era, no single person has had more of an impact than Jerry Garcia did with the Grateful Dead. By the time the band was done, they were declaring national emergencies at the concerts because so many people were showing up. I think still to this day, he holds the record as the most hours recorded of any musician that ever lived, because outside of the Grateful Dead, he also did a lot of studio work, and he had his side projects, Jerry Garcia Band, and the Bluegrass Band, and Legion of Mary, and all these different things. So it appears that he never really slept. Great musicians work with an invisible influence, and I would say that it's not commonly known outside of Grateful Dead circles exactly how much of an impact Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead actually had on the lives of people. It is said that the first medical marijuana law in California was started with money from Garcia's estate when he died. And also, I think this thing of changing the consciousness of 100,000 people a night, they were filling football stadiums. Bob Weir said they were so full that people would be passed out with nowhere to fall down, and doing this 3 to 5 times a night, for decades and decades and decades. And then all of those people went with this new consciousness, this different vibrational signature, and they went home and they interacted with their families and their friends. So even people that didn't necessarily directly come into contact with the Grateful Dead also were influenced. Also, a lot of people don't realize that most of the LSD that people consumed in the 1960s was actually made by the Grateful Dead sound man Augustus Owsley, or Owsley Augustus Stanley III. He was a millionaire. He inherited money from a whiskey family, and then went on to be, the world's largest and best LSD chemist. So the psychedelic movement probably would have died in the 70s if it wasn't for the Grateful Dead too. If you look back at the music and the popular culture of the time, throughout the 70s and 80s, there was really nobody carrying that torch in an authentic way except for the Grateful Dead. And it seems almost as if Garcia lived just long enough to pass the torch on to other people like Fish and Widespread Panic, String Cheese Incident, when this big festival scene had grown around the Grateful Dead, because people needed something to do when they weren't touring, and people really needed something to do when Garcia died. They created this huge scene, and he went home. once the seeds have been planted and watered, and you know, I mean, there's a tremendous number of musicians outside of the mainstream that are able to have a career as well because of what Grateful Dead and Garcia did. So again, you know, this huge invisible influence. This is what the true magician does. And if you're breathing right now, you have been influenced by the Grateful Dead. I mean, almost without a doubt. I guess I can't speak about the Middle East and Asia because I know the impact was a little bit less there. But as far as the Western world goes, even if you're not a Deadhead, your life in the modern era has been shaped to a large extent by the influence of the Grateful Dead. And you know, I think people are just starting to recognize that. In fact, in 2015, after the guy had been in the grave for I think 25 or 30 years, his band outsold every other act on earth. U2, Rihanna, Paul McCartney, all these people were on tour that year, Justin Bieber, and the Grateful Dead made more money in 5 nights, the surviving members without their star, than all of these other major acts made in their entire tours for that year. So this influence is starting to be recognized. So it's good to see, as a Grateful Dead fan and someone that's aware of this, people becoming more cognizant, because it used to be something that got a lot of ridicule and that people sort of looked down on. So tremendously influential and extremely important. And so this week, Grateful Dead fans refer to as the days between, because it's after a Grateful Dead song. He was born on August 1st and he died on the 9th. So if you have a lot of Grateful Dead Deadhead friends, you'll notice that they might be listening to a lot of Dead or talking about it a lot this week, and that's why. So I just wanted to kind of explain the real function of Jerry Garcia in the world. People that might not be interested, I'll put some links to some of the pivotal performances in the comments below, and hopefully, if you're not familiar with this music, this will prompt you to go and check it out. So hit the like button, subscribe, support us on Patreon, and thanks a lot for watching.